Dylan Moore with Irita TV, and I have in studio here Erin and Dan from WCRC, and we're going to be talking a bit about max mandates, vax mandates, mask mandates, and if there really are mandates and if it really is law, and what sort of options that people are figuring out in terms of how to deal with the fact that these might not actually be mandates. So first, I want to thank Erin and Dan for coming into the studio and giving everybody the chance to hear this. And the organization that you two belong to started, you'll tell me more, is WCRC. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about what WCRC is?
Sure, Dan, why don't you start off?
Sure. Well, we were just a bunch of people online on Facebook, and we were on a Facebook group, and we just were looking at what was going down, mainly the mask mandates when they first came out. And we just started complaining and researching and complaining and researching. And finally we got to the point where like, well, if we're going to change anything with our community, then it's going to have to be actually doing something. So again, after another 10 or 20 days, we're like, well, what are we going to do? And so we started looking into things and the law kept popping up. The early forefathers' documents, the U.S. Constitution, kept coming up. And so that's where we dove. We dove into that and realized that we could fight and produce documents, the law that allowed businesses that we were walking into that were demanding masks kind of take a step back and realize that they were, in fact, breaking the law. And so we actually served legal notices and made some changes. And so then fast forward again with the law and more research, and the vaccines came up, and here we are. We are right back into a legal researching battle and education battle and trying to get the word out.
Excellent.
The WCRC stands for Washington Civil Rights Council.
And then this is Washington State, everybody who's listening. We are going to be focused specifically on Washington State. However, we are going to get into the fact that this, with a couple small adjustments, should be applicable to any state that you're in.
Absolutely,
right?
Because we all have a state Bill of Rights or Constitution, and all of it emulates the federal Constitution in some way. Yeah, so the woman who was sort of spearheading this, along with, 4 or 5 of you? You guys would just get together and have dinner. Yeah. She's originally from the Soviet Union, so she could see the writing on the wall. And the group of you came up with an idea to pay a lawyer, and this was beginning of August?
Yeah.
August 2020.
Yeah. Well, no, this was just past August 20.
We're at the end of the year.
Right.
When did that happen?
Yeah,
okay,
we all knew the vaccine mandates were coming about mid-August.
Mm-hmm.
And so you all paid a lawyer ahead of time and said, let's pull together a notice to employers of the laws that they would be breaking if they enforced this. And that was sort of the beginning of a firestorm, from the documents that we created have now been, how many times do you think that they've been shared, downloaded?
Probably between 22,000 and 25,000.
Yeah.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
And it's moving fast.
Yeah.
It's moving very fast.
Yeah.
Still.
So do you want to tell me a little bit more about, some specifics of, okay, we've got these vax mandates, we've got these mask mandates and all this other stupid COVID regulation stuff that's been coming in. What's been your angle of attack, so to say? For example, we have, you need to wear a mask to come in here. Now we're getting to the point you need a vaccine to come in here, or you need a vaccine to work. What's it actually look like?
Well,
what you guys are doing? Yeah.
You start off with these Facebook memes that say a mandate is not a law.
Right.
Okay, well then let's back that up. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go back to your original civics class and remember that we have, 3 branches of government. The executive branch cannot make laws. And so what does that mean in practical application? It's called the separation of powers doctrine. And Governor Inslee is operating under the color of law right now. That means he's out there pretending that what he's doing has been passed by the legislature. And it's sort of through an impressive marketing campaign and the distribution of doctored data that he and the state have impressed upon the public the idea that these mandates and these proclamations are something that we can't negotiate, or that we can't voluntarily. We have to comply. It's not voluntary, is the impression that the state is giving us. And especially, as Dan said, this was their original mission, to explain to business owners they did not have to comply with this in the beginning. But, I mean, maybe, Dan, you can share some of the stories of why were the business owners afraid in the beginning, even if they understood the law?
Well, they were afraid. A lot of pressure was put on the businesses by L&I, Department of Health, even the liquor boards. So these people are thinking, these businesses are thinking they're going to be losing their license and getting fined heavily, and those words were thrown around by the state of Washington.
The threats were made.
They were.
And then, real quick, just for people outside of the state of Washington, LNI stands for Labor and Industries. It's kind of like our local OSHA. I don't think other states really have something similar. They'll ruin your day if you have a business. They'll mess you up. Yeah,
they'll ruin your day. But as Dan said, it was a threat. But according to the non-delegation doctrine, we call this the game of hot potato. If Governor Inslee does not have the authority to create a law, he can't pass that authority to L&I, the Department of Health and whatnot. But somehow he convinced them that they did have that authority. Again, this is all one big game of color of law, of explaining, of helping people think that they have the authority to do something that they don't.
So are you telling me that if you're a power-tripping narcissist and I convince you that you have authority, you'll actually believe it and run with it?
I guess that's how this is played out.
Seems to be what's been going on.
Yeah.
Totally weird.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. So then that game of hot potato got foisted to the employers, right, when the vax mandate came out. And here's the interesting part. Nobody actually has the illegal authority to do this, so they keep popping it around going, that Inslee knows he can't do it. He doesn't have the authority, so he makes the state departments do it. The state departments say, well, we know we don't have the authority, but let's convince the employers that they can enforce the mandates and the mask compliance
or coerce the employers.
Coerce. Right. Okay, coercion. That leads you to talking about...
Yes, well, coercion, basically anybody coercing somebody using rewards or punishments. And we've all seen this strange rewards. They've been throwing around Washington, free coffee cards, and sports tickets, and even a joint for a jab, a drug.
I didn't see that one, but yeah, I believe it, yeah.
Lots of them. And so those were rewards to try to convince employees to take the jab, to take the shot. And then, of course, here we are now with a punishment of livelihood and your job, losing your job if you don't comply with this vaccine mandate.
So that's right what I wanted to get into is how is your organization helping people not lose their job over this vaccine mandate?
Well, what Dan was just describing was a violation of the doctrine of informed consent, which is on every state law book, right? And that's one of the backbone points that we made in our education to these employers. The lawyer that we work with, his name is Lewis Ewing, and he created this constructive notice to employers. It was basically like a document that could apply to any employer doing this. And it laid out all these laws that the employers would be breaking. And it's really sad to say that most of them were unaware. Right, I mean, most Washingtonians were unaware. So,
and then do you have a couple examples of those laws?
Yeah, we've just been discussing them: the separation of powers doctrine, the non-delegation doctrine, the doctrine of informed consent. Really important that anytime you take a medical property, did you want to make a point?
Yeah, well, informed consent, that one in itself has the biggest red thread that basically comes from our forefathers around our ability to have freedom of choice, especially around religion, but freedom of choice in what we actually have put in our bodies, what medical intervention we actually have, and that includes masks, testing, and the vaccines. And so through time, since even the Nuremberg codes, they actually galvanized this particular law and throughout the medical field. The informed consent doctrine, which basically says that you have to, a doctor has to both inform you of the risks and the benefits of whatever medical intervention they're about to, have you do, and the risk and benefits of any alternative that you can have instead of the vaccine, and then only then after that, which they're asked for your consent. And
without coercion.
Without coercion. So you have to have both. You have to have the informed, and then you have to have the consent. And that's often, in fact, very often overlooked right now with the vaccine.
Well, and then for clarity's sake, are we talking about U.S. Constitution law? Are we talking about federal law? Are we talking about state constitution, RCW?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, this applies to all states. Every state has a doctrine of informed consent in some way, shape, or form. So just in this constructive notice that we have been handing out to all these employers via the people who download them from our website, or we go to speak at town halls, et cetera, you're informing the employer of all the laws that they're breaking because they cannot provide informed consent because informed consent can only be provided by a medical doctor. So this applies to the schools as well. If, and this is a big concern in Washington, if they mandate COVID-19 vaccine for children, they will be breaking the law of informed consent because even if you go to a doctor and get the vaccine, it's not the doctor who coerced you into getting it. It was the school or the employer who said your education, the universities, your education, or your employment is contingent upon whether or not you get this. That is violating the doctrine of informed consent. And this is huge. This is a huge law that every single American citizen should understand down to their core.
I would say world citizen, but
yeah, absolutely.
Depending on your country, I'm sure in China they're like, okay, yeah, we inform you that we're doing it now. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And the whole idea of it really absolutely must be without coercion. And the idea that our government thought they could get away with this so blatantly is hilarious. The final point of the constructive notice is not a law. It's an understanding of where liability would fall.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us throughout the last couple of years have come to understand that the vaccine makers have created their own vaccine court so they can avoid having to deal with liability, right? And that's exactly what the EUA is all about. If you give something an emergency use authorization, they don't have to be liable for whatever happens under it. So if they're not liable for damages, and the state doesn't want to be liable for damages.
Who is?
It's the employers, or it'll be the schools. So sometimes just informing them of that and saying, do you realize that, the way I always said it is to an employer, be less afraid of L&I or the licensing board coming to take away your business license because A, they don't have the authority to do it. So no judge worth his salt would ever hold that up because they don't have the authority to take away your business license. However, you get a savvy employee who gets hurt, paralyzed, die from this vaccine, and they sue you for damages. Yeah, that can go through. So be worried about that, not the other concerns and threats that are unlawful.
And those damages may not be covered under L&I insurance because it's an experimental vaccine. So I think this needs to be teased out in detail by all legal departments of every employer out there.
Yeah.
Because it could make or break them.
So can you guys tell me a little bit about the results, the reactions you've been having with employers, employees, whoever? So you've created these forums. My understanding is a lot of people are using them. What's the reaction? What's the success rate?
The constructive notice is just the first form in a 1-2 punch. Do you want to talk about the Statement of Declination?
Yeah, well, the Statement of Declination is the one that represents our religious exemption form, right? So, and it's very general. So it takes and puts a powerful statement, which I will just quickly read here.
And then if you guys want to give me this stuff, we can have it all linked in the show notes.
Yeah, basically, it's a strong statement. A statement, basically giving our notice that this is
according to the Civil Rights Act.
According to the Civil Rights Act, you're declaring your right under law, basically, to be exempt for religious reasons to take this medical vaccine. And so it's stating that. Now, a lot of the forms that the employers are actually handing over to their employees they're set up with all kinds of sometimes very unique and strange questions that make you feel like you're applying for or you're asking for permission from your employer for this right that you actually literally have. You have it already. And so that's the confusion that I think our documents are clearing up is making this statement that I decline this based on these reasons.
And this was another part of the snow job that the state did on employers. They gave employers also, under the color of law, an impression that they had the authority to grant or not grant religious exemption, but they don't. I mean, even in the idea of calling it an application for religious exemption.
The application sounds like permission. Yeah.
Right. And as if they have to set up certain qualifications. They asked for ridiculous things like letters from their pastor. You know, they asked for things like, can you define in a way that we think is appropriate what your religious belief is around this? You know, and you don't even have to be a religious person. It is your creed. It is your statement of belief that you believe it's an affront to your creator to knowingly hurt yourself or even kill yourself. Why would you do that? And so that's basically what we've been asking people so Boeing did this thing where they saw that for the first 2 months when we were helping state employees and city employees get their exemptions by using our documents, which basically, as Dan said, you state your declination. Declination means to decline. You state your intention to decline. You don't ask for permission. Mm-hmm. And so it was working. I mean, we had successes with nurses and teachers and state employees, city employees. And I think the state, because they saw how well it was working, they kind of did a little pivot with companies like Boeing. And they went out and broadcasted to everybody, you're not allowed to use anybody else's documents. You have to use our form or else we'll just categorically deny you. Again, they don't have the right to do that.
Right.
But they wanted to corner everybody into answering questions like, what is your religious belief that would preempt you from taking this vaccine? Which they don't, according to the Civil Rights Act. And according to the EEOC, they do not need to do that. So we tell everybody, here is the 4-step process. Okay, because this is an idea you're going to like, because I know you guys here to Read It TV are a stand for trying to get the truth out beyond that iron curtain of the mainstream media.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So we thought, well, let's take this opportunity. They've got this little form that they want us to state our religious exemption or our religious belief on this. Let's take this opportunity to get information out there that the media is stonewalling. Mm-hmm. So step number 1, you just simply say, my creator doesn't like it when I hurt myself. Yeah. That's my religious belief. And how do I back up that idea? Well, that this would hurt myself. Point number 2, I've got friends and family who have been hurt by this or killed. Mm-hmm. And then we invite people to briefly make a statement along those lines. And point number 3, according to the VAERS data, here's where we're getting past that iron curtain, right? Iron curtain would be the wrong metaphor. But you get, I get it. You get what I'm saying. Yeah. You know, then we put in there openvaers.com. You know, according to that, I haven't checked recently, but last time I checked, there was 18,000 deaths. And if you want to, you can say, and we know Harvard says that only 1% are actually reported. And then point number 4, to wrap it all up, my religious belief is that it would be criminal for you to ask me to hurt myself when it's been proven to hurt and kill others. Yeah. And we have found that, I mean, my personal experience with asking the people I've coached to do this, they always call me back up and say, I got it. I was granted my exemption. So,
how would you prefer that they say that as opposed to being granted their exemption?
Well, I wish that all Washingtonians.
What's a better verbiage?
I wish they deeply understood that it's their right to fight for.
Right.
And so they could say they won it. They won their freedom in that case. They weren't granted anything by any authority.
That's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing that people at least communicate to me that they've gotten from our talks, our documents, our summaries, and everything like that. They've got to a point where they've got an understanding of just a clear understanding of where their rights are, where their freedoms are, and that it's supported by the law. The law protects all of those things, and so when they get that, we're still living in a free country, and we still have these
still
freedoms.
There. Yeah, the law's still there.
Yeah. As much as it may not feel like it, because of this whole 2-year kind of battlefield of what's right, what's the law, what's not the law, and the proclamation, and all these very serious words,
mandates, orders.
That understanding, that deep understanding, is priceless for people.
And I think there's something else that's worth pointing out here is that when this all first came out, there was a bit of a shock and awe aspect to it where we're all going, what's going on? And going back to what you were saying, approaching businesses back at the beginning, and they didn't want to listen to it because they were scared. I think there's a large aspect at this point of everybody remembering where their balls are.
Right.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, I am going to stand up against this. And I think to show so many people having the success and so many people
Mm-hmm.
coming together, because one of the things that they want to do is make sure that we all feel like we're alone. You're the only
Right.
person who doesn't want this. You're the only person who doesn't want this. And when we recognize it's like, no, there's actually quite a few of us together, and the law's on our side, and there's a lot of people on our side, despite the fact there might be some screaming Karens saying that we're absolutely nuts. We're trying to kill everybody while they hope that we die at the same time. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's really exciting to hear that we're figuring out the steps. People are re-understanding, I guess is a good way to put it, what their freedom is and how to get it, and then having the use the word again, balls to say, okay, I'm actually going to do it.
Well, sometimes that understanding comes back to the businesses as well, because the businesses have applied for a business license through whatever agency they have. And so that contract, that is a contract that they have. And so just understanding that there's a law underscoring that contract, and in that when they first signed this contract, it had nothing to do. It didn't have anything to do with, mandating a vaccine or any other medical implementation. So when they know that just knowing that, they go, well, now I've got some questions to really hit L&I with, and wait a minute here, isn't this a breach of contract?
So, and do you guys have any examples of business owners or even restaurant owners you guys were mentioning is obviously a big thing, because for whatever reason the restaurants have been hit with the stupidest rules throughout all of this.
In the beginning, I think that the state had prepared, right? They had done a real snow job.
The world
on them.
had prepared, but
right. But what I'm saying is they had prepared for a few patriot businesses to fight back and say, this is just going to be bad for business. Why would I do this mask? Especially when they, shut them down to 25%. And I think they had enough people hired with L&I to go around and scare everybody that most businesses complied. However, from the few businesses that I've heard that actually stood up, they're still in litigation, like they've never paid a fine. There's scare tactics going around that, I've been fined $10,000, but nobody's ever actually had to pay it.
Yeah, I'll write $10,000 on this piece of paper and slide it over. Doesn't mean you're going to give it to me.
I don't, to my knowledge, I mean, I could be wrong on this, fact check me, but to my knowledge, I don't think there's another business out there who legally fought the fines and actually had to pay it. I know one down in Enumclaw. I know a success story that you might have heard of, Greg Anderson, who was the police officer up in Snohomish County. Was he police or state patrol? Who he first put out a video stating, to all his fellow compadres, he's like, come on, we've got to stand up against this. We can't enforce these laws. This is ridiculous. And the rest of the guys in his, what do you call it? Squad?
Unit? I don't know.
Unit. Yeah. They're like, you got to take that video down. We agree with you. Even his captain, chief, he said, we agree with you, but you got to take it down. And he said, well, I can't. I just told the world to hold up their spine.
It's out there. I can't take it down.
I'm not gonna ask. That's out of integrity.
Yeah.
Right. So they fired him. This was early on. This is over a year ago. It wasn't even. We didn't even have vaccine mandates at that time. They just fired him for standing up. And fortunately, he had a little bit of a side business as a martial arts gym.
Yeah.
And when people found out his ability to stand, or they were just so enamored with his patriotism that they went and signed up
the business,
and his business tripled. And then people are like, go start a podcast.
Yeah.
And so now he's doing what he loves, and he's very successful at it, and he's happy that he quit the police force. So, we're out there telling success stories of businesses like that who, once they really plant their flag and they say, I'm a patriot business, patriots come out. And I know they are, because in Facebook, I see tons of posts saying, these guys are standing up. Go send them your money.
Right.
Like, we've got a coffee shop out in North Bend where I live that was the first to stand up and say, you don't need to wear a mask or have a vaccine to come here. And so that's the only place we all go and have coffee.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a party there all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Ellen and I will come and try to take all that money.
Well,
but that's the fight, right?
Well, no. So I've asked them. I've asked the owner. I said, have you heard from L&I? And she said, here's the challenge. L&I actually apologizes when they call us now, because the only reason they call is because, I hate to sound derogatory, but some Karen or some Chad called L&I.
What Chad wouldn't call. Karen would
We're
call.
calling.
Chad's
It's really,
the owner.
I know. And they called L&I and tattled. And L&I called and said, "We're so sorry. We've got to call you again and say someone complained, and have a nice day."
Yeah.
There's no enforcement. There's no consequence to the business. And so she just thinks it's funny when L&I calls at this time. And I'm hearing that story a lot from business owners.
Well, and making a funny comparison here again is that it sounds like if we were to say put this on a schoolyard with a bully, you might get picked on by a bully for forever and ever and ever and ever, and the only reason is because you've never fought back.
Right.
And if you were to fight back, even if you were to lose to that bully, he's probably going to pick on somebody else after that, because the whole point of bullying is I want to be able to pick on somebody, and they just take it.
Right. So we have for business owners who want some assistance on how to push back, some of them are getting picked on more than others. I can't exactly describe this, but it has to do with where they are situated next to the county line. For some reason, this state wants most businesses to be closer to Seattle. It doesn't want business to thrive out in rural areas.
I can guess why that's the reason, but we don't have to get into that.
Right.
Into this conversation.
That's a battle they've been waging for quite a while. So some of these businesses that have been doing really well outside of the King County line, right, were picked on more than others. And so we're trying to pull together an information packet. It'll be up online by this weekend. But Dan and I are out there just explaining it verbally and making copies to groups of businesses around the area. Mm-hmm. And it's, if you'd like some ideas on things that you can send back to L&I, if they do send you an email that says, by the way, you have to comply with, Vax Verify.
What about if the narcissistic power tripping dorkwad L&I guy actually shows up to your business? What do you tell him?
This is exactly, whether it's an email, a letter, or you're talking about it verbally, it's all the same thing. You can hire a lawyer to send this letter if you want, or you can represent yourself. And you basically challenge L&I or the Department of Health to, just send back the policies?
Put it in writing.
Put it in writing. Yeah, put it in writing and show us where you have the authority to enforce this.
That's a great one. That's easy.
It's very easy, and you rarely get a response.
If you're threatening a fine with us, then you need to write us, what law or what regulation you are actually basing this on.
Yeah.
And just that alone sometimes you get crickets.
Right. And when it comes down to the Vax Verify part now, that they're asking restaurant owners and events over 500, they're asking them to do Vax Verify.
Asking.
They're asking. It's
an important word.
Yep.
Ask.
They're asking. They're encouraging, but it is not a law, right? These business owners can write back to L&I or whoever is harassing them if they're getting harassed.
Department of Health, for example, could be.
Right, and they can say, "Can you put in writing that you'll accept any liability for anybody who has gotten the vaccine?" And upon our, enforcement, let's say our employees, you're forcing us to tell our employees that they need to do this. Great. Would you put in writing that you're going to take on the liability? And then again, crickets.
Silence.
Yeah. Again, it's just kind of you sure you want to mess with me? Oh, no.
Right.
We're going to go pick on somebody else. Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be boisterous. It doesn't have to be, but it can just be silent and firm, like put it in writing and let's begin this conversation.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah.
Most of for example, I like to talk to a lot of chiropractors because they were hit with all these things early on because they represent part of the medical establishment, right? And I asked a lot of them, "Are you receiving any threats from L&I or Department of Health?" And they said, "Well, no, we all got kind of a form letter back in the beginning." Okay, great. I check in a few weeks later. Are you receiving anything else? Well, no, we were told that we had to, track the vaccination status of all of our employees, but then just keep that information to ourselves. We didn't have to submit it.
Right.
Right. And anything else? Any threat of fines if you don't do it? Any enforcement? Anybody's going to come check on you? No. And so if a lot of businesses are saying, we just round file this information because we know it has no authority behind it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, so you've basically created a template for anybody to say, okay, I want to download your forms, and maybe I'm in another state or another county and I got to make a few adjustments, but I download these forms, and I can go, if we have to, file suit on this, right? Can you tell a little bit about class action versus pro se en masse lawsuits?
I can't myself, but I know,
Or
Well,
you
I was
had
telling
the
you that-
idea,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, I know this
So-
hasn't happened yet.
Well, for example, this is sort of the backbone of what the WCRC is doing. Is
Okay.
I like to use the metaphor of I used to be a professional photographer, right? This was back when we had film. We dipped it in chemicals. you
I
know?
remember. I'm not
Okay.
that young.
Okay. And then digital came along,
Yeah.
and I was a fine art wedding senior photographer. This is how I made my living. And then digital came along and kind of put photography in the hands of everyone, and business for photographers went down dramatically, and you had to figure out how to distinguish yourself in the market again, because your neighbor next door could take pictures and claim that they were just as good as yours. And I feel that this may be a bold statement, but I feel what the WCRC is doing is it is teaching citizens how easy and how powerful it is to represent yourself. There has been, again, this creation that hiring an attorney certified by or licensed by the bar is going to cost you a tremendous amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
and you better leave all that expertise up to them because you're not going to be able to understand it.
Right.
And I'm a single mother, and back in August I hadn't read any of these laws, but I had an understanding of the Constitution. I had a love for it back to the 4th grade when we first had civics class, and so it just ignited this fire in me when I first read the constructive notice. And when I go out there and talk, when Dan goes out there and talks, some people assume we're lawyers, and we have to remind everybody, no, we're not. We're not licensed lawyers. We just love this, and it's not as hard to understand as you may think it is, especially the basic constitutional law. So what we're doing is we've noticed, I mean, it's not hard to notice, that lots of lawsuits have been filed over the course of the last 2 years. Have we had any major wins? I mean, I know we have, but have we had anything in Washington that has actually really put us on the map and helped us in this battle against our governor?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of creating a class action lawsuit, in theory, might be a good idea. However, you get that in front of one corrupt judge, and there goes all that work and all that research and all that money. Class action lawsuits, in my opinion, work if you have a truthful legal system.
Mm-hmm.
But in the absence of a legal system, a judicial system that has integrity, we have to go at it a different way. And we're going to have to go at it with numbers, with massive amounts of people, all basically putting that sheriff's star on their chest and saying, we put you on notice for breaking the law because our sheriffs aren't doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and our judges don't have the integrity. They're all bought, not all of them, but some of them, right? And so this is about teaching citizens, giving them in an inexpensive way the template material to go represent themselves and feel like they have the confidence to do it. And Lewis, our lawyer, has a 90% win rate and does most of this before it even gets to court,
Right.
by just simply putting the individuals or the organizations or the school boards on notice in a way that is so powerful that they're quaking in their boots. They're like, oh my God, look at all the laws that we didn't realize we were breaking. And they capitulate and come negotiate to the table right then and there.
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up the money aspect to this. Law these days, not all of it, but a lot of it, really boils down to who has enough money to pay for the lawyers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And less to do with what actually happened. What was the law?
Mhm.
And for regular people, if a cheap lawyer is $250 an hour and you don't want a cheap one because he sucks and you got to pay $500, whatever.
Right.
Like, okay, we gave you a $5,000 retainer that was gone in 5 minutes. Like, how long can you actually do that? And there's a technique. I mean, it's called lawfare, right?
Right.
Where who's right doesn't matter. I just know I have more money, and I'm going to send my lawyers in, and you're going to have to give up at some point. Well, if you're pro se, that doesn't completely eliminate this, but it makes it a lot harder because you're going, I got all the time in the world.
Right.
You're the one clocking up the
Right.
law fees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and like she said, it's coming down to numbers.
Yeah.
So all these big companies, like at least in this state, some of the biggest ones are Boeing and the Puget Sound Shipyard. So they have, I think Shipyard's got 14,000 employees, and then Boeing, I think all over the country, has got about 127,000 employees. And so when you start adding up individual lawsuits that are not necessarily in court, but are moving to court with some powerful documents that they got that put them on notice.
That are going to, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
that are going in front of multiple different judges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all these companies, every company usually does a risk assessment, liability, economic risk assessment. And when they start seeing 10,000 employees filling out religious exemption forms and not wanting to take the vaccine, and Boeing this last weekend, they are going, even if 8,000 of these people take and move towards a wrongful termination suit based on this thing that they've already given us and put us on notice for.
Can we handle 8,000 lawsuits at the same time?
And if each one's $50,000 or $100,000, how's that going to affect? That's not even including the assembly line and what kind of downtime and government contracts that are not going to get fulfilled, and the deadlines coming and going with planes, and it just starts getting into a rat's nest. And so that risk assessment is going to go, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And do they have some grounds to sue on? It looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got word that the legal department at Boeing is scared.
Busy.
Good.
Yeah, they're busy, and
Good.
they're wondering what the heck is this document and how come it's coming in from so many people. I think last word we had last Friday was that 10,000 Boeing employees had filed for a religious exemption. I think that's 1 in 5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And do you know if that's your paperwork or not?
Well, I mean, we don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
We don't know, but we do know that we have spoken to, personally, I've been in front of groups of hundreds, so has Dan, and we helped them facilitate a way to communicate with each other, Facebook groups, Telegram groups, email groups. And so it's not just us. There's other groups around called freetochoose.com. Lots of groups have helped Boeing employees communicate with each other to for example, the union. Do we want to talk about what happened outside of the Boeing union?
I want to hear it.
Yeah, the Boeing protests in Everett basically started the last few Fridays in front of the union building.
Yeah.
And so just this last Friday, Jim Walsh showed up.
Representative
showed up, and with a bullhorn, he spoke. And now people started seeing somebody opening up the building and plugging in extension cords, and the rumor got out that the Boeing union was actually, inviting him to speak. Well, that was not quite the case, So there's this huge stir about what's happening, and is the Boeing union on the side? Are they not? I mean, we have multiple. We're keeping track of multiple chat rooms on Facebook and Telegram that we're just seeing this stir, this crazy stir of Boeing employees uniting together and communicating as one group. I mean, it's still growing.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of individuals out there that are, what do we do? How do we respond? What kind of templates can we use? But they are growing in numbers, and they're growing in unity, which again is coming up to their legal department and their risk assessment.
No, that's great. And then, I mean, if this technique works against Boeing,
right,
what wouldn't it work against?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, didn't you say 47? I mean, this was last week's data, so I'm sure it's more now, but 47% of the Naval Shipyard had applied.
Yes. Yeah. We just heard from a high-level admin person in one of our trainings that came to learn, said that, yes, 48% of the 14,000 people, so that's about 7,000 people, are refusing the vaccination and claiming exemptions at the Navy shipyard. Yeah. So, and they're kind of a different, not as complex of a company that Boeing with all their outside shops and everything, but they have numbers. They have huge numbers, which 50% is 50%.
That's way huge.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit now. You mentioned it before. What about schools? Mask mandates, vaccine mandates for children.
Right.
Has anyone used this process against them yet? Have they seen any successes, or is there a plan? Like, tell me a little bit more there.
So that's what's next. I'm a mom myself, and I want to assure all the parents out there to stay calm, because this one is emotional for us, because we've, learned that the FDA, I'm not exactly sure what wording they're using right now, but they're recommending the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds have emergency use authorization, right? And again, there's so much fear tactics to this. Parents really need to calm down and breathe and look at what they're reading and educate themselves about this. The first point to make is that all the information we heard earlier this summer that the Pfizer vaccine was now technically authorized.
I heard that never actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, we've really got to calm down and understand this. When our team first read the document that came out from the FDA, I had to read it over 5 different times to try to understand what they were saying. It was purposely written by their legal team to be a word salad. They couldn't just come out and say it's authorized or it's not authorized. And once we finally interpret it correctly, and it wasn't just us, I mean, nationally this information has come out now, that the Pfizer vaccine being distributed right now is still only under emergency use authorization. What was authorized was a future version of the vaccine that won't even be on the market until 2023 called Comirnaty. Well, what the heck do we need that information for?
Right.
That's like saying that the ghost of Christmas future is going to visit and we've decided he's a good guy. You know, I mean, like, what is it? We don't care if you think if you've preemptively given authorization to a vaccine in 2023. That's not what's on the market right now.
Yeah.
So it was their tricky way of telling the American public that it was authorized when it wasn't authorized. Now, why do they technically still need it under EUA? Because that exonerates them from liability.
Right.
So there's no way.
So that is tricky. So
Right.
they deliver the propaganda punch to say, oh,
Right.
it's authorized, you can go get it. However, we didn't actually do that. We're still under EUA, so we don't have any liability.
So we don't have any liability. But how many headlines did you see in the news that said FDA has authorized the vaccine?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
I mean, it was blatant. So now we have to really tease apart what this means for kids. Okay, so they gave it emergency use authorization. They did not give it full authorization, and they won't give it anything beyond EUA because of the liability. Children will start dying.
Yeah, well, and then something I want to jump in here, and I say this because I take this for granted, and I keep having conversations with people, and I realize that they don't. And I know you two know this, but I want to say this to everybody listening.
Yeah.
This isn't a vaccine.
Right.
This is not a vaccine. I had a conversation with a friend about this the other day, is that a vaccine supposedly introduces a dead virus into you, so you develop antibodies against the dead one, so when the real one comes around, you use the antibodies against the real one. This thing does not do that. It doesn't do anything to that sort.
Right.
And the friend I was talking to, she says, well, what should we call it? I said, we should call it an experimental drug.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's a new thing that people don't know what it is. It comes in a needle, sure, but that doesn't mean it's a vaccine.
Right.
So that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here, but I just
yes.
to reiterate that once again, I
Well,
wanted to get that out there.
Well, I would like to, in every single press and written form, and if they replace vaccine with
experimental drug,
it would change to the territory.
Well, and I mean, we're casualties of the propaganda as well, because we're using the word vaccine the whole time here.
Yeah.
It's experimental drug. So, I mean, we'll battle it the way that we can.
Right.
Vaccine's easier to say.
But so the big question that I've had a lot of parents call me about this week is, I've heard that the state is going to now mandate it for all children to go to school. They're going to make it required. And I do know from inside sources, a high level up at the state, they're considering voting on whether they're even going to allow religious exemption forms for kids. Now, this would be criminal because religious and philosophical exemption from a vaccine has a long legal precedent, at least in the state of Washington. I've had mine on file for my son every year. And so for them to overstep that, something that has been on the Washington law books for years, it would just be astonishing for them to attempt this. So even
if they did, and sorry to interrupt you, even if they did do that, that doesn't mean I don't have, I still have the informed consent still applies.
On an experiment.
On an experiment, yeah. But here's the thing. How many parents don't understand this? And how far would the schools go to saying, hey, if you don't get your 5 to 11-year-old this shot, they're not allowed to come to school next Monday. And so here's the thing. We got to carefully tease this apart. The next thing I've heard, and this is from one step away from the executive director of the board of directors at the state level, okay, is they're thinking about just sidestepping the democratic process, sidestepping the vote, and rolling it up into this emergency order, which we actually should take some time to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
But they're going to try to just say, as part of the governor's emergency order, school children are required to get this vaccine. Religious exemptions will not apply. Now, this could freak everyone out if they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, parents are going to run off and say, I don't have a choice now. And this gets to the heart of our legal education agenda here, which is that the emergency order is fraudulent in so many ways, and we can
break it down,
break that down for you guys. But if they go that route, we have a way to push back. We can absolutely say, you can't carte blanche tell us all to do this because of a fraudulent emergency order. So let's circle back to that. But to answer your question of what are we doing for the schools, myself and the team are going to pull off what I hope to be the most beautiful and enormous legal action that Washington has ever done.
We need it.
Yeah,
please.
But it is not a class action lawsuit. What it is I hope to get 1,000 parents, and we're really close, 1,000 parents to all volunteer to send some particular notices and forms, not only into their school boards, but into OSPI, which is the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So that's like our State Department of Education. This is, as we've been discussing before,
I'm sorry, real quick. This is the one of the statewide executive positions, correct?
It's a state board. OSPI.
This isn't the I can't remember the title of, because we got the governor, we got the Secretary of State, we got the Commissioner of Public Lands, we've got the Attorney General. We vote on these guys separately. There's a Superintendent of Public Education.
That's who it is.
So
yes, it is the Superintendent of Public Education.
This is like the governor of schools.
Yep. His name is Chris Reichdell.
Yes.
Okay. He and his other board members.
Yes. Okay.
They're literally the head of the Hydra right now. Schools are governed under WACs, not RCWs. Over the summer, they got real sneaky, and they passed a WAC that basically ties the state funding for every school to whether or not they complied with COVID mandates, the social distancing, the masks, etc. I am not clear yet on whether they promised extra money if these schools carried out these measures, or if they just said they would withhold their state funding. I am not clear yet on how much in each district they can, every district runs on the money that they get from the local property taxes, right?
Right.
Their local draw, but then they also run on state funding.
And they get federal funding too, right?
Yes, and so how much are they being kind of held over a barrel right now? Like, if they didn't carry out these measures, would they be able to function? And we do know that OSPI already threatened and took some money away from a more rural school district that attempted to not comply. So would that school district be able to just keep running without that state money? I'm not sure. So the point I keep driving home with these parents is we've been directing all our anger at these school boards, and sometimes rightfully so, because I wish they would stand up.
Right.
However, imagine being a school board president who needs to say, listen,
we lost all our funding because
we lost all our funding. So if we don't comply, we can't even have school. We can't even pay for teachers.
I would say that's preferable, but I mean.
Right.
Another conversation again.
For some parents, like myself, I'm a single mom. I can't do this work I'm doing unless my son is at school.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of parents out there, and bless them for standing up. But they always, hands on their hips, say, just pull your kid out of school, just homeschool them. Well, the other half of my parenting team doesn't think like I do, and we're divorced. And if I attempted to pull my son out of school right now, he would do unspeakable things to our parenting plan, and I could lose my son. And so I know I'm not the only parent out there who is over a barrel. What about the single parents out there who say, if I don't have a place for my child to go learn, I can't go feed that child. I can't go to work. So I have so much empathy for all the moving parts of this situation. I've heard that in our school district, our president of the board is actually empathetic with our cause. But I would love to sit down, and I will soon, have a conversation with her and be like, tell me about this. What are you being threatened with? So the WCRC's legal plan is we're going to go directly after the state. And I would like to, along with all these parents who are on this team, right, let the school boards know we're on your side. The school boards work for us. We are their employers.
Well,
And
so is everybody. But yes.
Yes.
So the whole state, yeah.
But essentially, we gave them a job that is over their heads. They're
Mhm.
having to negotiate between being threatened by OSPI and all of us upset parents. We need to, just like the sheriffs, right? We need to go in, step in and say, hey, let's assist you push back. And according to, this gets into our discussion of the emergency order. We have laws on the books that have been there for decades around how to handle infectious diseases and a state of emergency. And in the case of an infectious disease, it's clearly stated in those RCWs that the local authority is supposed to assess what's going on. And I can't remember if this is the state of emergency RCW or the one for infectious disease, but it's clear that the local authority was supposed to, like the King County Local Health Authority, was supposed to be the one to assess what's going on in the county, get back to the state and say, this is how we're handling it. Same with the school boards. The school boards were supposed to decide if they were going to close down or not. Were they going to social distance? So that's why the schools out in rural areas who didn't have a single COVID case in the beginning were saying, why are you making rules that apply to the entire state? We haven't even had COVID touch our county yet. And so as parents, I want to help parents communicate with the school boards and say, we want to help you get your authority back because it was stripped from you. So we have a legal action that I'm so excited about. It's brilliant. I don't actually want to talk about it too much on the air.
That's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to be just because you can't give away your plans to the enemy, right? You know. But the hint that I can give you is remember Patrick King and the win that he had in Alberta. This was 6 months ago, 9 months ago.
I believe so. This was the guy who said, "Please show me a sample."
He said, show me a sample that you've isolated the virus.
Correct. Yeah.
And they couldn't do it. And he came out on the media and said, I won, we won. No more mask mandates and no more virus. You know, there's no more COVID mandates in the state of Alberta or the province of Alberta.
Yeah.
They had a plan B and they threw it out on a technicality. Okay. So imagine, though, if he had, basically, he is pressing them for public information that they should be able to provide, that they've based all of this on, right? The state, or in that case, the province. We're going to do something similar, along with about 3 other really home run strategies. And imagine that same thing, that same process done only times 1,000 parents. It's not just one Patrick King. It's 1,000 Patrick Kings.
That goes back to what you were saying,
right.
Is that if we've got 1,000 people, all pro se,
right.
presumably,
right.
where you can't just say, okay, we're just going to sit back and throw technicalities at you until you run out of money.
Right.
If it's 1,000 at the same time, it's just a different.
All filed in different counties.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we go to the point we're having to file an injunction, we would file it all in different counties. But I mean, we pressure the state, according to the RCWs, that say we can demand to ask for proof of how you did this. We're going to say we need proof that these masks even diminish the spread of the virus,
right?
The quote unquote virus. So this is what I'd like to tell parents out there. I've got an email address if you want to hear more about the process, if you want to get involved, and especially if you think you can get friends involved and start organizing up to 20, 30, 50 parents per school district. Please email WA parents, so WA parents at protonmail.com.
And that'll be below too.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fantastic part is that we've already got so many parents excited to do this. And, you know, a class action lawsuit could take years to come to fruition. As parents, we do not want to be enrolling our kids in school in 2022 and seeing masks on our kids. Right? We don't have time to wait. The great thing about this approach of having people represent themselves pro se and having such strong notices before you even go to court is that you get action right away. Within days of us filing this notice.
We want to negotiate.
Yeah,
right?
we want to negotiate.
Because we don't want to go to court over this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, within days of us filing this notice, we are going to get traction. We're going to hear from the school boards and from OSPI. We're not going to be sitting around, for years waiting to get a favorable opinion from a judge.
Mm-hmm. And, another thing that I want to add to this is that we need to have a longer-term attention span. And I believe you two would agree with this, because right now we're getting inundated by this stuff that a group of people who have a very long attention span came up with. And if we continue to be reactive and like, oh my God, there's masks. Oh my God, there's vax passports. Oh, there's social distancing. Oh, the restaurants going to well, we're always a step behind.
Right.
And it sounds like what you're doing is what I'm going to suggest is we got to see what the next move is going to be.
We have to stay ahead of the game.
And start staying ahead of the game. And this needs to be a long-term game because the people putting this on have a long-term game, and we need to start matching what that long-term game is. So, coming back to one of the things you said, we need to calm down a little bit.
Right.
Take a breath, calm down, stop being so reactive to the immediate stimuli in front of us, and say, okay, what's the long-term game that needs to be developed here?
Yeah, absolutely. And do it right. We have to do it right. Our team is trying to get the opinion of several lawyers from the constitutional law group, from attorneys licensed by the bar, from federally licensed lawyers who, I mean, there's a term we should all understand called a legal eagle. It's something we didn't create that, but
I'm unfamiliar with that. Please tell me.
Well, it's kind of a colloquial term for someone who knows the law really, really, really well, but maybe didn't go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finding that it's those people who are actually volunteering their time and doing extraordinary work. And, I did have a civil rights lawyer show up to one of my events a few weeks back, and she's, really wanted to assist and help. And when we sat down and I discussed with her, where we were at with the laws that we were using to fight this, she was unfamiliar with most of them.
Yeah.
And I was just in shock. She thought I was a lawyer, and I had to sit back and go, no, I'm a single mom who just, reading off RCWs to
This isn't that hard. I just went and read
it.
It's on the state website.
And she's
just
like,
go and read it.
I'm going to have to look into that. And it's just astonishing how the
professionals
bar,
don't know how to do their job.
Well, the bar system has sort of coaxed the academic route that the legal industry has taken to move everybody into a specialty and away from the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And so, it's very telling that we have very few bar licensed attorneys trying to help right now, trying to take up the mantle. I do want to discuss, though, the overarching carte blanche reason why everybody thinks Governor Inslee has the ability to just step over the law, and that would be this fraudulent state of emergency. Do you want to share some of the key points of
I do want to hear this.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, basically, real quickly, he can declare an emergency only under 4 triggers. And number 1 is a riot, and the next one I think is a public disturbance, which I would kind of include in with a riot. But then the third one is the most common one, which is a physical emergency, like mudslide, hurricane, windstorm, earthquake kind of thing. Which we think of as a normal emergency. Now, the fourth one is an energy emergency. So if there's a lack of gasoline or something, we saw that in the 80s. But he, instead of going after and using this idea of this pandemic and under some what was it, the WRC code, RCW, right? Instead of that,
quick pause, real sec, just for everybody who's not in Washington State. RCW is Revised Code of Washington. Those are the laws passed by the legislature, and WAC, which are very whack, is the Washington Administrative Code, which is what the bureaucratic regulations that are made based off of the RCW. So
every state's going to have their own code letters. We're just using Washington
and every
code letters.
state will have that double layer. What the legislator passes and what the bureaucracy does with it. So
so instead of going after and using what they've used for the H1N1, the SARS and the MERS and all that kind of stuff, they went the first time ever they declared an emergency under a physical emergency, which usually when you have a physical emergency, you have a beginning, you have a beginning, you have a middle, and then you have the cleanup, and then it's done. And so it's clearly delineated. Yeah. And so this one definitely was, and usually after 30 days, things usually wrap up within 30 days. And if not, the legislature comes in and says, okay, well, let's look at this. Do we still have an emergency? And that's when...
you said the word usually.
Yes.
It's not usually. The legislator, by law, is supposed to come in every 30 days.
They have not come forward in this case.
They're supposed to assess whether we still need to be in a state of emergency every 30 days.
Right.
The legislature or the four corners of the legislature need to vote. Well, when was the last time that happened?
Yeah, it's been a long time. And so some of the evidence that he brought to
we're talking about Carl
declare,
Kanthack.
Wait, who brought?
Are you talking about Carl or are you talking about Governor
the governor? The governor
okay.
came in and says, we have a pandemic, and based on the models from UW, now there's an agency inside the state of Washington, and I can't remember what that agency is, that's in charge of data, calculating, and knowing what kind of measurements are measuring this idea of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. Well, he went outside to the University of Washington, a little team that created the modeling for this pandemic. And
modeling, my favorite subject.
Modeling.
Continue.
So again, just ideas, number ideas, basically, that by a lot of volunteers, some of them seeded from the Gates, the Gates Group,
Foundation.
Gates Foundation. They were volunteers. You're supposed to have a contract with the state of Washington.
Are you telling me that the guy making the vaccines had guys get on the team to determine that we need vaccines?
Yes.
Exactly.
No way.
Exactly.
Who could have ever predicted that?
Not only that, we have this great guy, Carl Kanthack, that actually has put all this together, and he's kind of educated us on this subject. But he also said that the hospitals initially said, you know what, we're getting a lot of COVID cases coming in and COVID sickness coming in. We need to designate 10% of our hospital ICU beds for COVID only. So if it's 100 beds, then we need to designate 10 beds for COVID patients, alone. And so when those 10 beds started filling up, they got to 9. Oh my gosh! They're like,
capacity.
oh my gosh,
90% capacity.
The media came out saying, "Oh my gosh, we're at 90%. We're reaching full capacity, and we need to create tents and overflow centers and all that kind of stuff." And
it's all a facade.
Right.
It's all a freaking facade.
9 beds to 10 when there's 90 other beds. I mean, some of them are just normal emergencies, but there's more beds out there. So that there's a lot of kind of snake in the ground kind of actions that we're talking about.
I would even say it's not just a lot. It's like there's no. I mean, the Hindu myth that the Earth is flat and it sits on the back of 2 elephants. That turtle sits on a turtle, and that turtle sits on a turtle, and a turtle sits on a turtle. And you go, it's just turtles all the way down. Well, it's just lies all the way down.
Right.
You don't go down and find a fact somewhere. It's just nothing but propaganda and lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in September, which would be a little bit, this recent September. There was some media splash that hospitals out in rural areas were so overrun with COVID cases that they were needing to transfer COVID cases into the ICUs in the city.
Yeah.
And this is how Carl Kanthack thinks. He reads this and he goes, oh, this is a bunch of BS. Do Washington citizens not realize that every rural hospital, as a matter of course, for the last several decades, transfers their ICU patients into the city because very few...
Because they don't have the resources.
They don't have the resources to do it. They don't have the room. So to say that it's all of a sudden a new thing is complete BS. It's not a
lie
new
by
thing.
omission. Yeah.
Yeah, lie by omission. You have to... So this is, again, where the journalists... 10 years from now, a lot of journalists are going to be tried. For slander, for perjury, for everything that they've done wrong.
Well, and
we don't have to wait that long.
We even thought, well, where do we get our news? And so I think if you would have said, well, why don't we go to the source of the information? Like, let's talk to paramedics, and how about people working in mortuaries? So we went to these, and we're like, okay, I get it. They had the facts of the increase, the non-increases during COVID, and then the super increases after the vaccine came out. Mortuaries, the same thing. And paramedics driving their wheels off now, trying to handle
the increased load that's happened since the vaccine's been rolled out.
Huge increase, Talk to them. Yeah.
So just to summarize for the listeners, why do we know that this is a fraudulent state of emergency order, right? Because if it falls under the RCW that Washington created years ago around how to handle a state of emergency. If it does, which there is no clear delineation of when it starts and when it ends. So, I think most lawyers and judges would say using the state of emergency protocols was probably erroneous to begin with. This should have fallen under the RCW for infectious diseases, which is much more of a fluid, subjective concept, right? So if it falls under state of emergency, the legislature is supposed to determine every 30 days if we're still in it or not.
And again, look, I want to be very clear on that language. I wish we had the
RCW in front of us.
Yeah, RCW in front of us. But it's supposed to, or it must?
It must. Yeah. It must. It must. It must. And so that's not happening. Why? What got sidestepped and who got convinced to not convene? Right? And this is something that Representative Jim Walsh has been trying to do along with Phil Fortunato. Lots of Republican legislators out there, congressmen, trying to get us to have a special session to get in there and say, okay, enough is enough. There is no state of emergency anymore.
Or if you guys are actually going to vote and say there is a state of emergency, stand up and vote for it. Let's see you vote for it.
Let's either vote for it or let's explain this is ridiculous. Okay, so if it's not actually a state of emergency and it falls under the RCW for infectious diseases, again, the authority to determine how to handle it is in the law. So what do you want me to say? Not supposed to. According to the law, must be given to local authorities, okay? Like the local health authorities. The only way this state is allowed to step in is if that local authority was sick that day that they were supposed to report, right?
Yeah.
And so because the state just went and stripped all the local health authorities of their authority and just convinced the whole state that they needed to follow rules from the state, and they did it through threat and coercion. That's another reason that we can identify that this is not a lawful.
Or
how do you say this?
Procedure.
Yeah. Procedure. There you go. It's not a state of emergency. And when I say this to groups, and I go, "Are we in a state of disorder?" And everybody goes, "Oh yeah, we're in a state of disorder according to the state of emergency, right? That we're in a state of disorder and we need to get back to an orderly fashion." And I go, "Okay, wait, think. Did the virus, the thing that they're identifying as a virus that is apparently jumping from person to person, did that put us into a state of disorder? Or did their COVID mandates put us into a state of disorder? Did the virus say that we no longer have toilet paper on the shelves?
Yeah.
Did the virus
say you can only have 25% occupancy?
Yeah. Did the virus do that? Did the virus make all these state patrol lose their jobs over the mandates? All the shipping containers that are stuck out in the sea that can't offload because we don't have truckers. Did the virus do that? Or did the mandates do that?
Yeah, and you start looking around. People are still going to the fair, without masks on. And they're gobbling up their whatever they're buying, and they're going to sports games, and the Super Bowl is going on, and just like you look around, and you're like, it's just homeless people with immune systems that really have been downgraded. Quite a few. They're still running around. They're doing their thing. There's not dead people. I mean, pandemic? Are we in a pandemic? Emergency. Where's the emergency? We should be able to visually see what emergency is. Yeah, and it defies all logic.
So, I want to get close to wrapping this up here because I think we've had a really good discussion. Was there any other point that either of you or both wanted to cover before we did that?
I just want to let people know that, we still live in a free country. And if we don't stand up now and find this understanding of what we have, what we've maybe taken for granted for a few years, if we don't remember who we are as a nation, who the power that we have,
or realize to begin with, because some of us,
our freedoms,
never knew in the first place,
then we need some help. But I think I'd like people out of my presentations. I hope people, if anything, they take home is just that they can understand that we have the freedom, we have the power as people. And I don't know about you.
I was speaking to someone on the phone on the drive here who really delineated the difference between the optics of what America looks like according to the media, and when you go to the grocery store and you see everybody masked up, especially in Washington. That compared to the reality. Dan and I are really lucky because, we don't have lives. We don't go out, I don't go out to nightclubs on the weekends anymore. I don't go to bars. I don't
Yeah.
have any of the normal social things that we used to do on the weekends. Now we go do rallies with patriots, and we have the distinct pleasure of being around, rubbing elbows with so many people standing up. My son calls them truthers,
Yeah.
like we're all out there doing this together. And so we have better friendships than we had before COVID. We've got people all standing up with this like Paul Revere spine running through them. And it's so fun. And you compare that to the optics of what you think America looks like. And you would just
if you were to turn on the news.
If you just turn on the news. Yeah. And so I am constantly trying to tell people out there, Dan and I have a finger on the pulse of what's really going on inside Washington. We are not a blue state. We are a deep purple at this point, almost more red. If you look at how the counties actually voted, we've got very few blue counties according to how they actually voted. And so it's so much more hopeful. And the other thing I tell people is if you look at a map of how many red states are out there compared to blue, and you're considering giving up your autonomy and getting the shot because you think you don't have a choice because you're going to lose your job, just open up the map and look at all the land in this country that is still red, that you don't have to have a vaccine to work, and temporarily go take a contract in a different state or consider moving for a short time, or stand up with us and the huge amount of people in Washington who are willing to say, for a couple of months, maybe I won't have employment, or maybe I'll go start a side business, or maybe I'll go work for someone else for a little while.
Or maybe I'm just going to stand up and have the employer stand down. Like we're seeing all over the place. Yeah,
we're seeing it all over.
Yeah.
So just don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. This country is so much more awake than the media would have us believe.
Yeah. And you might miss it if you can't see the dinners that people are having in people's houses of 10 to 50 people. I mean, it's under the cover, but it's everywhere.
Yeah,
across the state.
We know a guy who had to knock a wall out of his house to accommodate so many people showing up every Friday night.
That's a great reason to knock a wall out of your house. It's a great reason to knock a wall out of your house. I did want to add this at the end. I believe you're familiar with Center for Self-Governance.
I am, yeah.
Are you?
No.
I recommend checking it out. So we've had Mark Hare, the executive from Center for Self-Governance, on here as well. And his description of, if we're going to boil down the problem into one big thing, is that the United States is actually a 7-boundary republic. We have a tendency to talk that there's three branches of government. Well, we have 3 branches of government in 2 different places, and there's a big boundary between the 2. And honestly, there's even more boundaries than that when you look at to the county level and the city level and the school board level, and there's just boundaries all over the place. Our enemies, we'll put them under that broad category, hate this because with so many boundaries, no one group or no one individual can get all the power. Right. So the long-term game here is how do we start erasing these boundaries? And they've been at it for a while. Like we're not just at the beginning of this. And what we've seen with this state of emergency that didn't just happen in Washington. It happened in 49 out of 50 of the states, South Dakota being the one exception, is this beginning to erase the boundary between the executive and the legislative, right? So putting the legislative power into the executive hands,
right?
And what the cure to this is to put the boundaries back.
Put the boundaries back.
And what you guys are doing is that.
Right.
You see, we're looking at the law. We're looking at what the governor is allowed to do, and okay, we have the state associations and the school boards, and the county is supposed to do this. You're talking about all these different boundaries, and this has happened.
They're still there. Yeah. The boundaries are still there.
The boundaries
we just
are still there.
Forgot.
Well, and then we have all this regional government that's been splattered all over these boundaries, and the idea is to continue giving more and more authority to these regional governments where the original boundaries don't really have that authority anymore.
Yeah.
And if we can get those regional governments detached, one example has been the school boards all over the country have been detaching themselves from the National School Board Association,
it's awesome.
which that's one of those conglomerating things to get around the boundaries. Well, that's putting... I don't know if that's putting the boundary back, but it's making it a little darker when it was a little hazier before.
Right. Well, it's putting the authority back in with people. It's the it's the people bringing their authority home back to the land where it belongs. Yeah.
Yes, and what I see that you guys are doing, and I'm saying this because I talked about long-term play. I want to give this kind of a long-term idea. Is what we're doing here is putting these boundaries back.
Yes,
and we have to continue thinking, how do we keep putting these boundaries back? Because there's people working against us that are continually thinking, how do I take these away? Because let's say everything that we discussed here was successful, and we stopped.
Mm-hmm. Well,
the next minute they'd be back going, okay, how do I take these away? Yeah,
our team has had to ask ourselves, because we just started off as a group of citizens.
Yeah,
right. We just filed our articles of incorporation last week.
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't have a business structure. This wasn't a formal agreement. This was just a bunch of volunteers out there pounding the pavement, trying to get the information out there. We had to sit down after we've had so much success helping people, and nobody got paid, right? We're all volunteers. After we had so much success, we had to sit down and go, do we need to take this more seriously and realize we're going to be around for a while?
Mm-hmm.
Because Dan gave up his job. I was about to get a job in September when they finally let our kids go back to school. And I was like, I looked at my savings account and I said, I think I could hold off getting a job for a month while I work on this. Well, now it's November. I'm still doing this, right? And so we had to look at, are we going to be here next year? What are we going to be doing? My hope is that once we get so many people in Washington and the country educated on the rights and the Constitution, and we win this, because I know we will. By God, I know we will win.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we've got to rebuild government, like what Mark Hurt is talking about.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to be around for that, and that's what the WCRC is doing. Maybe you can give us a chance to talk about the website.
I wanted to say plug everything now that you want to plug. Website, whatever.
We love to have extra volunteers come and help join us in the fight, and we've got lots of different things to do. And we have a website right now. It is hosting our documents that if people want to download and share those. That's another thing people can do. Just share these documents to people that need them.
These are not copyrighted. Just give them out.
Give them away. Give them away.
Right.
What's the website?
Website is marchforfreedomwa.com. Marchforfreedomwa.com. And so that's the hosting site. And we do have email too. If you want to reach us by email and ask us anything, that is WCRC at protonmail.com.
Yeah. And when you first jump on that site, you're gonna see March for Freedom was a protest march that started last year, and a lovely woman by the name of Victoria started that. And then because we just didn't even have time to throw together a website, she's hosting all of the WCRC's information on a page called Stand Up. So there's a red button you can push, or you can go to the page Stand Up. And she's also a member of the WCRC. Eventually, we may have our own website, but right now we're just.
Sounds like you need an IT volunteer.
Yeah, we've had them. Yeah, and she's. We're really grateful because she's also part of the team, and so she's hosting that. And we do need donations. So is the button red? It's a PayPal button.
Big, you can't miss it.
Yeah, you can't miss it. And to be very transparent, where's this money going towards? It's going towards the one lawyer that currently has been working with us full time this year, but we also have the potential of a few more that have been they're coming on board. We have a couple of paralegals that we would like to pay, and now that Dan and myself and
we got to pay you two, so you don't have to go back to work, right?
That would be great, but there currently is not enough funds to do that. But we don't want to quit. Yeah, Dan and I don't want to quit. We really want to keep going. So any funds that can be given. And just to drive home a point you said, if anybody emails WCRC@protonmail.com, you're not going to get a form response. You're going to get an actual volunteer who we're calling ourselves legal advocates because there's people who learned the strategy, right? You're going to get an actual person who's sitting up late at night after their job answering emails. These are real people.
And we take the toughest questions to our lawyer 3 or 4 times a week. So we've made this process work so far so good with the big numbers, but money does help keep our rallies going and bring this out in public. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation. If you guys don't mind, I'd definitely like to have you back at some point.
Sure.
This is heavy news, and again, this is a very Washington-centric conversation, but please, all this should apply. I mean, look at your local laws. All this should apply to whatever state you are. Please copy and paste this all over the country, or even Canada, or
Mhm.
wherever, right? So
the Statement of Declination is based on a federal law. It can be applied in any state.
So thank you again, and looking forward to see how you guys progress and having you back on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.